what LinkedIn was like back then? Because from my understanding, we've gone from a job searching platform, you log in purely to try to find a job or to hire somebody, to a real social media powerhouse.
It is very different. I mean, actually, I say that. There are a load of similarities when it comes to culture, when it comes to values. They are the foundations that have been, at least in my experience, been there since day one. And they are two of the key reasons why I'm still there today. But if you look at the platform itself, you're absolutely right. It is a world away from what it was. When I joined, we were 80 million members. Today, we're over 800.
Wow.
When I joined, we were 800 employees. Today, we're over 17,000. When I joined, it was your CV and a job searching site. Today, we're the largest distributor of professional content on the planet. We help 6 people a minute find a job. There are 200 million job applications every month. It's growing at some of the fastest rates that we've seen in our history. It was up, public conversations are up 30% in January this year. And the size of the business is also very different. Last year, we hit $10 billion. I don't remember the specific number when we joined, but I suspect it was sub $75 million globally. So it is a very, very different place. It has been a joy and frankly a privilege to be part of that growth over the last 11 years. But again, like if I look back on the reasons that I joined, they're the same reasons that keep me there today. When I joined, people, I met arguably too many. We've improved our recruitment process because I probably met about 12 or 13 people in the interview process for LinkedIn. And normally when you meet that many people, there's like a third who they fall into the category of inspiring, I want to work with, I want to work for in some capacity, I can learn from them. There's a third who you're like, yeah, I'm really happy to sit next to them into the office. And there's a third who you're like, oh, yeah, I really hope I don't have to work in like such close proximity to them. And everybody fell into the first category, like very, very clearly into the first category. I was like, this I can get on board with. The second thing was the product. Even though it was relatively basic at the time, I was in a business development role and sales role for many years. And when I reflected on my usage of LinkedIn, even then I found myself using it every day. And I was like, if I'm using it every day, there's something in this. There is real value for the member. And then the third bit was potential, which was infinite at the time. 80 million people, it was growing at triple-digit percentages year over year. And I thought, if it's growing this fast and the revenue is this small, and there's an appetite for people to build their professional networks, to find jobs at scale, like there's got to be something here. So this combination of people, product, and this incredible potential were the three things that attracted me in the first place, and certainly the three things that keep me here today. And the fourth thing that has become more important to me, and I'd love to say it was with me 11 years ago, but it wasn't, was this idea of purpose. Like the mission and vision of LinkedIn is to connect the world's professionals, make them more productive and more successful, to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. It makes you feel pretty good when you go into work every day with a higher purpose of like delivering great value for people around the world.
Yeah. And was it always part of the plan for LinkedIn to transition from that kind of almost static CV, online CV platform to this huge social media where people are distributing professional content, building their personal brands and so on?
Yes, but I don't think there was clarity on how to get there. Like if you sit down with Reed and with Alan Blue, one of the other co-founders, they are like remarkable people. And I remember Reed telling me one day that they sat down in the early days and they wrote a list of, firstly, they had this idea of professional networks and the fact that as the world was becoming more globalized, as borders were becoming more porous in the digital world, there was this opportunity for professionals to connect with each other, and like your network is critically important, and it's about who you know and who they can help connect you with. And there was a value in the connectivity of networks in a professional context. They then wrote down about 20 different ways that one could monetize a professional network once it had scale, and it had benefited from a series of network effects. And today, we've still only scratched the surface on some of the ways to deliver value to members, to deliver value to customers, and ultimately to generate revenue for LinkedIn as well. And so I think they had pretty good clarity on the potential. If you start with a mission of connecting the world's professionals to make them be more productive and more successful, there are hundreds and hundreds of millions of billions of professionals around the world. So they had that foresight to know what was possible. They had the foresight to know the business opportunities, but as with any business, you figure out as you go to determine like what the path is from A to B.
Yeah. And so what do you think were some of the key decisions that led to the transition from what LinkedIn was to what it is now?
I think having a very clearly defined culture and values, it's like who we are and who we aspire to be and the principles that guide us. And the number one value at LinkedIn is members first. It is, and I think that is the value that has kept us grounded over the last decade plus. I think it is the value that ensures the platform remains a safe, trusted place for professional conversations. And it has meant, in my opinion, that we always have a sort of guiding or true north when we're taking business decisions. I think if your primary lens is this in the best interests of our members, and all of our customers are members, and 800 plus million members around the world, is this in the best interest of the members? If you keep that as your true north, I think it leads to making sensible decisions and stops you doing things that are detrimental to the network. So I'd say members first, like first and foremost. And then like from a cultural perspective and from values perspective, and notably from a culture, like making sure that you hire people that are both aligned with and can add to the culture. And actually that was one of the mistakes we made, which was for many years, we spoke about this notion of cultural fit when we were hiring people. And you hear it thrown about today often. We want to find people that are great cultural fit for LinkedIn. And what that ends up meaning is that you hire a load of people that look and feel exactly like the folks that you have in the business today. And diversity at LinkedIn in the first few years was not great. And I think arguably our business suffered as a result. And as we sort of started to grow up a little and we recognized the value and the importance of a diverse team bringing sort of new ideas, new opinions, new ways of working to LinkedIn, our business really started to, it was already working well, but it started to thrive. And now we think rather than a cultural fit, like a cultural add, who can come in, who's aligned with our values, like our values are not rocket science, who's aligned with the values but can add to our culture. It's been a really important shift that we made over the last few years.
That's great. That's great. In terms of active efforts to get more people onto the platform, I've seen, I think it was last year, you started hiring a creator management team. And I've spoken to a few of the creator managers, they're great. And then we've had new features pop up, whether it's, the frames for profile pictures so people can have a video, pronunciation of people's names, adding pronouns, featured section, a ton of different features brought in by LinkedIn, all fairly recently, like the last few years. What else is happening to encourage people to post on the platform, to be active on the platform?
We've encouraged people to post for many years, as you know, like we've had a feed, I think, for the last 9 years. So ever since the advent of the feed on LinkedIn, we've always encouraged people to post professionally relevant, engaging content. over the last couple of years specifically, and notably over the last 12, 18 months, we've made significant investments into the creator community. And a creator for us is anybody on LinkedIn that regularly shares engaging, relevant, professional content. And there's a couple of recommendations that we have for creators specifically. First and foremost, just you can shift the mode on LinkedIn to creator mode. That gives you a slightly different look and feel to your profile. Second, I feel like I'm preaching to the converted here. I think like sort of king creator sitting next to me. This is what you do for a living. So you've probably got far better advice than I do. But change to creator mode. Publish at least 4 times a week. Think about the breadth of content, but don't be too generic. So for example, if you're going to talk about management, don't talk about management in generic terms. Try and go to specific subtopics within management. So talk about performance management and then sort of use the hashtag performance management versus hashtag management.
Yeah.
Tag people that you think may be interested in participating in the conversation. Respond quickly to people who are commenting and posting on it. Experiment with different formats, experiment with different topics, follow other people on LinkedIn that are doing this really well. If you look at people like Helen Tupper or Sarah Ellis, they're talking about coaching and career performance. If you look at, there's a brilliant student on LinkedIn called Carissa Tan, student, young professional, advising people on the journey that she's going on, to the likes of Indra Nooyi, the ex-CEO of PepsiCo, who I think now is actually on the board of Amazon as well, talking about leadership and the lessons she's learned throughout her career. So there's when we talk about creators, I think often there's a perception of what a creator is. And a creator can be somebody of any age, anywhere around the world. They just have to have an opinion. They have to have something to share. It could be an individual. It could be a company. It could be a publisher. But it's definitely something that we have invested heavily in from a feature and functionality perspective, as well as creating communities of creators and hiring creator managers as well.
And following on from that, who are some of your favorite creators?
I think probably some of the folks that I've just mentioned. Like if you, Indra Nooyi is brilliant, absolutely, like she's had a fascinating career, is always wonderfully candid, constructive, helpful for anybody looking to get into business, and especially for people looking to get into leadership. Follow Bill Gates for like some of the best tech on the planet. The folks that I mentioned earlier, sort of Sarah Ellis and Helen Tupper, both they wrote a book on coaching and careers, which I found really fascinating. And I think they're probably some of the main ones that come to mind. Of course, I follow you as well.
It's really interesting because I've definitely noticed a transition in the kind of content that's on the platform.
Yeah.
It's become much more personal. People share their vulnerabilities and they link it back to work, but it just cuts through a lot of the kind of more corporate-esque content that I used to see more of on the platform. Even now we've got Mr. Beast, who's a huge YouTuber. We've got Vladimir Klitschko. We've got Jacinda Ardern. It feels like LinkedIn is now open to everyone, regardless of industry.
Without a doubt. In the early days of LinkedIn, it was financial services professionals, technology professionals. If you look in the UK today, actually the largest organization or largest company on LinkedIn is the NHS. So the breadth of professions, there are brilliant people on LinkedIn talking about medicine and nursing every day. Like if you look at the breadth of professions, that has changed dramatically over the last decade. I would argue LinkedIn is a much more inclusive place, a place where people have a much greater sense of belonging today than perhaps they did 5 or 10 years ago. And coming back to your comment about authenticity, I think that's what cuts through, and like even more so over the last couple of years during COVID, where our professional lives and our personal lives started blurring more, and people started to recognize that if they were still within a professional lens, but if they were more authentic on LinkedIn and they shared their vulnerabilities more, that built followership, it built resonance with others. And in my in my opinion, like it gives you other people to look at and think, oh, they're going through something similar to me. Like everyone's not living in this sort of perfect world. We all have our own insecurities. We all have our own anxieties. We all have stresses at work. We all have stresses at home. And I think it's important for people to be honest about that. And I'm not sure that historically they have been.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's so nice to see content, for example, from a really successful business person where they just acknowledge that just sometimes it's really shit.
Yeah.
And I remember I was in Pret once and I was not having a great day and wasn't having a great week. And I saw a few posts from like that type of person. And I felt like they were direct messaging me that.
Yeah.
And it's so nice. There's a real community that forms as a result, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah, I agree. And look, when I can't remember the year our publishing platform started. It must have been in 2000 and, in fact, you may know better than I do, but I think it was about 2014, 2015. And I remember the first post that I wrote was an article called "Why Coming Out is Good for Business." And I was like unbelievably anxious about writing it. And the title was stolen from a wonderful book by Lord John Brown, the ex-CEO of BP. And I remember like actually hovering at the time, like with my finger over the publish or the keyboard. And I was chatting to my HR partner at the time and she came over and like pushed my hand out. And she was like, it's time to do this. And what struck me, and a lot of the commentary was about the struggles coming out and a lot of the anxieties and pressures and sort of panic attacks that came with that, and a lot of the benefits that I experienced as a result of that process, specifically within the workplace. But what struck me about that was the number of people that pinged me after I did it, privately pinged me to say how appreciative they were and how that was also their experience, but they'd never actually seen anyone in business talking about it. And for me, you know, from like 2010, 2011, I'm a bit of an open book. And prior to that, certainly wasn't the case. But that was my aha moment where I was like, okay, like vulnerability is actually a key strength in business. Whereas traditionally, I think vulnerability has been seen as a weakness.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one of the first long form pieces of content I produced and uploaded to LinkedIn was called "The Lonely Reality of Being a 21-Year-Old Entrepreneur."
Yeah.
And it was just me whinging, having a proper whinge about having to dash around London the whole time, not, making much money, not having much motivation, having no one around me who really got it, having to work on my own, all of that kind of thing. And it got such a great response. So many people who had been there, so many people who were there currently were all kind of throwing in support. And one person commented, complete stranger, basically saying, hey, it's no different when you're 42.
Yeah.
Let's grab a drink. And that person, a guy called David Goldberg, ended up becoming a really good mentor to me.
Yeah.
And he would help me with business, teach me some really good learnings, and I would help him in turn with kind of building his personal brand and just giving him some advice.
Yeah.
And then, I think a couple of months later, he said, I've got a friend who I think you'd really get on with. There may even be an opportunity for you to work together that can introduce you. And at that time, I was like taking any introductions. I was like, of course, introduce me to whoever. Who is it? And he turned around and he said, it's a guy called James Caan from Dragon's Den. And I was like, oh my God, huge. And then through that introduction, which came through a post about me being vulnerable on LinkedIn and sharing my journey, that ended up with me working with James Caan. And now we're still working together 3 or so years later. And that all came from one piece of vulnerability and just saying it how it is, which I think is really special.